In the heart of a war-ravaged galaxy, human resilience had become a force no one could ignore. For months, Captain Kara Ashford had led the crew of the Nova Horizon, a ship that had become a symbol of resistance. The war against the Zoreth had turned the galaxy into a vast battlefield, with countless civilizations caught in the chaos. Kara had seen friends lost, alliances shattered, and the human spirit tested in ways she never thought possible. Yet through it all, humanity had shown an unyielding will to survive. The Nova Horizon wasn't the largest ship in the fleet, nor the most technologically advanced, but what it lacked in size and firepower, it made up for in determination. Kara was its captain, a woman who had earned her place through years of service and countless battles. She was strong, focused, and driven, but there were days when even she felt the weight of everything on her shoulders. Her crew was diverse, a mix of humans and allies from different worlds, but the one person Kara couldn't quite figure out was Lyra. The alien woman was an enigma, her history a mystery to Kara. Lyra was not like the others. She had her own past, one that was clouded with secrets. But she was also fiercely loyal, always there when Kara needed her most, and for that, Kara trusted her. They had fought side by side for months, surviving ambushes, space battles, and countless close calls. But despite their shared experiences, Kara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lyra than what she let on. One evening, after a particularly brutal battle with the Zoreth, the Nova Horizon landed on an abandoned moon to make repairs. The cold, desolate landscape stretched out for miles, and the crew set up camp to rest for the night. Kara, as usual, was the last to settle down, walking the perimeter of the camp, keeping watch for any sign of enemy movement. She felt a strange unease, a sense of foreboding that she couldn't shake. The moon was silent, save for the wind that howled across the barren plains. The quiet made Kara uneasy, and she found herself retreating into her thoughts as she sat by the fire, staring into the flickering flames. The crew had been through so much. Kara knew that the war was far from over, and there were days when the burden of leadership weighed heavily on her. She had been trained for battle, for strategy, for leadership, but no one had prepared her for the emotional toll. The faces of the fallen haunted her dreams, their voices echoing in her mind. Every decision, every command felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 lives. As the fire crackled, Kara pulled her bedroll closer, trying to get some rest. The cold of the moon seeped into her bones, and no matter how many layers she wore, she couldn't shake the chill. It wasn't just the cold of the moon that made her uneasy. It was the cold she felt inside herself, the emptiness that had come from months of fighting and loss. There was no time for grief, no time for weakness. She had a crew to lead, a mission to complete, and that was all that mattered. But as she lay in her bedroll, staring at the stars above, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loneliness. She had spent so long pushing away her emotions, burying them beneath the duties of command, but in the stillness of the night, they crept to the surface. The quiet seemed to amplify everything, the pain of losing her comrades, the guilt of decisions she couldn't undo, and the longing for something she couldn't quite define. And then, she heard it, a soft rustling sound coming from the edge of her bedroll. At first, Kara thought it was one of the crew members, perhaps checking on her, but when she turned her head, she saw Lyra standing there, her silhouette outlined by the soft glow of the campfire. Lyra was unlike anyone Kara had ever met. She was tall, graceful, with smooth skin that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, a color that seemed almost otherworldly. The first time Kara had seen her, she had been struck by Lyra's calm, almost serene presence. There was an air of mystery about her, something that both intrigued and unsettled Kara. But it was also that same air of mystery that made Lyra a trusted ally. She was always there when it mattered most, never hesitating to put herself in harm's way for the crew. Without a word, Lyra moved closer to Kara's bedroll, her footsteps light and graceful. Kara sat up, unsure of what to say. There was something different in the air tonight, something she couldn't quite place. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked down at Kara, her expression unreadable. I can't sleep, Lyra said, her voice barely more than a whisper. I need your warmth. Kara blinked, confused at first. She had never seen Lyra like this, vulnerable, almost shy. It was as if the strong, confident woman Kara knew had momentarily disappeared, replaced by someone in need of comfort. Lyra lowered herself onto Kara's bedroll, sitting beside her. The warmth of her presence was immediate, and Kara felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. For a moment she said nothing. She didn't know what to say. She had always prided herself on being a strong leader, never showing weakness, but now, in the quiet of the night with Lyra beside her, she felt something stir inside her. I've always been alone, Lyra continued, her voice barely audible against the wind. Even among my own people, I was always an outsider. I never knew what it was like to belong, but with you, with the crew, I feel something I've never felt before. I don't want to lose that. Kara felt a pang in her chest as she listened to Lyra's words. She knew what it was like to feel alone, to feel like the weight of the universe was on your shoulders. But to hear Lyra speak so openly, so honestly, was a rare thing. Kara had never imagined that Lyra, the confident, mysterious alien, could feel the same way. You won't lose it, Kara said softly, her voice hoarse with emotion. We're in this together, all of us. We're family now. Lyra looked at her, her eyes searching Kara's face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt different now, more intimate, more personal. There was no battle to be fought, no mission to complete. There was only the shared understanding that, in this moment, they were not alone. Lyra shifted closer, pressing her side against Kara's. The warmth of her body against Kara's was soothing, a comfort that Kara hadn't realized she needed. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to relax for the first time in what felt like forever. The night was quiet again, but this time it felt peaceful. Kara didn't feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to let go, to feel the simple pleasure of being close to another person. The warmth of Lyra beside her was all she needed to forget about the battles, the deaths, and the uncertainty of the future. As the hours passed, Kara found herself drifting off to sleep, the gentle rise and fall of Lyra's breath beside her calming her restless mind. She had no idea what the next day would bring or how long this war would last, but for now, she allowed herself to rest, to find solace in the warmth of another soul. In the midst of the war, in the cold of an abandoned moon, Kara had found something she had almost given up on: peace. The next day, the sky above the moon was an endless expanse of cold, dark blue. The barren landscape stretched out before Kara, empty and desolate, like a forgotten corner of the universe. She had woken early, as she always did, to check on her crew and ensure everything was in order. There was always work to be done, always something that needed her attention. The cold of the morning crept into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the weight she carried within. Lyra had already risen before her, and Kara found her standing near the edge of their camp, gazing out across the silent plain. She was silent, lost in thought, her violet eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something far beyond the reach of their current mission. Kara had seen this look in Lyra's eyes before, an unspoken longing, an unreadable expression that seemed to hide a deep well of emotions. It was a look that Kara couldn't quite understand, though she knew that Lyra, in her own way, carried just as much weight on her shoulders as the rest of them. As Kara approached, Lyra turned to face her, offering a soft smile. The expression was fleeting, but it was enough to make Kara pause. Lyra wasn't the type to smile often, and when she did, it was always with a certain quiet strength, as though she had learned to hide much of her true self beneath layers of reserve. "I've been thinking," Lyra said, her voice quiet but firm. About everything. Kara didn't ask what exactly Lyra was thinking about. There was no need. She knew that Lyra's thoughts often wandered to places that Kara couldn't follow. The past, the war, and their complicated relationship were all things that Lyra kept buried, just beneath the surface, always hidden from the rest of the crew. But for once, Kara felt as if she, too, could understand. Her own thoughts had been consumed by the same questions. What had they all sacrificed? What would they lose next? "Do you ever wonder," Kara began, her voice hesitant, "if it's all worth it? The fighting, the endless battles, the loss of so many lives. We've been through so much. How do you keep going knowing that?" Lyra was silent for a moment, her gaze softening as she regarded Kara. Her eyes held something deep, something full of understanding. Lyra stepped closer, her presence steady and grounding, like a force that could anchor Kara when the world around her seemed to be spinning out of control. "I keep going because I have to," Lyra said simply. "Because, even when the weight of everything is too much, I know that I'm not the only one carrying it. We're all in this together, and together we can make it through. You taught me that." Kara couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth spread through her chest at Lyra's words. She had always been a leader, always the one to guide her crew, to push them forward when things seemed impossible. But hearing Lyra speak like this, as though Kara's strength had helped her too, made her realize just how important that connection was. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the people they had become to one another, the trust they had built through shared struggle. As they spoke, the rest of the crew began to stir, waking from their bedrolls and beginning their morning routines. There was work to be done, as always, and the crew needed to prepare the Nova Horizon for the next leg of their journey. Kara knew they couldn't afford to stay on this desolate moon for long. The Zarath were still out there, and every moment spent idle was another moment they could be discovered. "Let's get to work," Kara said, her voice returning to its usual commanding tone. "We have a lot to do." Lyra nodded, though her eyes lingered on Kara for a moment longer than usual. There was something in her gaze, something unspoken that Kara couldn't quite place, but for the first time it didn't bother her. Instead, it felt familiar, like a secret they shared in the quiet spaces between the chaos. Throughout the day, the crew worked diligently. The Nova Horizon was a ship of many talents, and each crew member had their role to play. The engineers worked on repairs, while the medical team ensured everyone was in good health after the previous night's battle. Kara oversaw everything, as she always did, but her mind often wandered back to the conversation with Lyra. The things they had said, the bond they had formed, felt stronger than anything she had ever experienced before. It was more than just camaraderie. It was a connection, something deeper, something that went beyond words. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, Kara found herself alone with Lyra once again. The camp was quiet now, the day's work done, and the only sound was the wind whispering through the rocky terrain. Kara sat by the fire, the warmth from the flames spreading through her, though it did little to chase away the lingering sense of unease that had taken root inside her. Lyra joined her, sitting down beside her without a word. There was no need for words between them now. They simply sat together, their shoulders brushing, the silence comfortable, familiar. "I know what you're thinking," Lyra said after a long pause, her voice soft but steady. "You're wondering how much longer we can keep doing this. How much longer we can keep fighting and losing without it breaking us." Kara looked at Lyra, surprised by the accuracy of her words. It was as if Lyra could read her thoughts, see into her very soul. But instead of feeling exposed, Kara felt a sense of relief. She didn't have to explain herself, didn't have to put into words the doubts that had been swirling in her mind. "I don't know," Kara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I don't know how much longer I can keep leading, keep making decisions that cost people their lives." Lyra turned to her, her violet eyes meeting Kara's with an intensity that made Kara's heart skip a beat. There was something in those eyes, something that spoke of shared experience and quiet understanding. "You don't have to carry it all alone," Lyra said, her voice barely audible against the wind. "You have us. You have me." Kara's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard Lyra speak so openly, so vulnerably before. It was as if, in this moment, everything between them had shifted, had changed. The walls that had always stood between them were crumbling, and in their place was something new, something fragile yet strong. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They simply sat together, side by side, the fire crackling softly in front of them. There were no promises, no grand declarations. There was just the quiet presence of one another, the unspoken bond that tied them together. Kara didn't need anything more. She didn't need words or explanations. All she needed was Lyra beside her, her warmth and presence a reminder that, despite everything they had been through, they were still human. They were still alive. As the stars began to twinkle above, Kara allowed herself to close her eyes, to rest for the first time in what felt like forever. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if they would win the war or lose it. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. She wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The morning after their quiet moment by the fire, the Nova horizon was already preparing to leave the moon. Kara stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the crew bustle around her. The repairs had been completed, and the ship was ready for the next stage of their journey. There was a sharp, focused energy in the air, as if the crew knew that time was running out. The Zorath were closing in, and their ultimate weapon was still out there, waiting for them. Kara had always been able to keep her emotions in check, to push through the doubts and fears that crept into her mind. But today, something was different. She felt the weight of everything more heavily than before, the burden of command pressing down on her chest. Every decision, every order she gave, felt like it carried more weight than it ever had before. She had led her crew through countless battles, but this was different. The stakes were higher now. This was the fight that could end it all, either their victory or their defeat. Lyra approached her, her footsteps soft against the metal floor of the bridge. Kara turned to face her, noticing the way Lyra seemed to glide through the air, her calm presence a stark contrast to the urgency of the moment. Lyra was always the one who brought balance, the one who kept Kara grounded when the weight of command felt too much to bear. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice steady and calm, as always. Kara nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was ready. The truth was, she didn't feel ready. She had spent so much of her life preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to face it. The responsibility of leading her crew, of making the decisions that could change the course of the war, was overwhelming. "I have to be," Kara replied, her voice a little rough. "We don't have a choice." Lyra studied her for a moment, her violet eyes searching Kara's face. There was something in her gaze, a deep understanding, and for a moment Kara felt exposed, like Lyra could see right through her. "You're not alone," Lyra said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "We're all in this together." Kara's heart skipped a beat at Lyra's words. She had heard those words before, but today they felt different. Today, they carried more weight, more meaning. Kara had always known that her crew was important to her, that they were a family, but she had never fully understood just how much they meant to her until now. Lyra's words reminded her of the bond they shared, a bond forged in the fires of battle and tempered by the struggles they had faced together. They weren't just a crew, they were something more. They were a team, united by the same goal, the same fight for survival. "I know," Kara said, her voice barely more than a whisper, "but it feels like too much sometimes." Lyra reached out, placing a hand on Kara's shoulder. The touch was light, but it carried a weight that spoke volumes. It was a simple gesture, but to Kara, it felt like everything. Lyra's presence, her support, was all she needed in that moment. It was enough to remind her that she didn't have to carry this burden alone. She had Lyra, and she had the crew, and together they would face whatever came next. As the crew began to gather in the command center, ready for their final push, Kara's mind was filled with a single thought. They had to stop the Zorath, no matter the cost. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and she couldn't let them fail. Not when so many had already given everything for this cause. The Nova horizon lifted off from the surface of the moon, leaving behind the desolate landscape and the memories of the battles they had fought. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and cold, but for the first time in a long time, Kara felt a sense of clarity. The war had been long and the losses had been great, but she knew now that it was worth it. It was worth it for the crew, for the people they were fighting to protect, and for the future they hoped to build. As the ship entered hyperspace, Kara stood by the window, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. She felt a hand on her arm and turned to find Lyra standing beside her, her gaze fixed on the same stars. "We'll make it," Lyra said, her voice steady. "We're stronger than they think." Kara nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. She had always believed in the strength of humanity, in their ability to overcome the odds, and now she believed in the strength of the crew. Together, they could face anything. The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings, preparations, and the constant hum of the ship as it made its way toward the Zorath stronghold. Kara barely slept, her mind consumed with thoughts of the battle ahead. Every plan, every decision felt critical. There was no room for mistakes, no time for hesitation. The crew was ready, but Kara couldn't help but wonder if they were ready enough. The Zorath had advanced technology, and their weapon was unlike anything the humans had ever faced before. But Kara wasn't going to let that stop them. She couldn't. The fate of everyone they loved, everyone they had fought for, depended on their success. Finally, they arrived at the Zorath stronghold, a massive, imposing structure that loomed in space like a dark fortress. The Nova horizon was no match for its defenses, but Kara wasn't planning on attacking head-on. They had a plan, one that relied on stealth, speed, and precision. It was their only chance, and it was a chance they had to take. Kara gathered the crew in the command center, giving them one final briefing before the operation began. She looked around the room at the faces of her crew, faces that had become so familiar to her, faces that she had come to rely on in ways she couldn't fully explain. These people, these soldiers, had become her family, and she would do whatever it took to protect them. "This is it," Kara said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "This is the moment we've been working toward. We're going in to disable the Zorath weapon and stop them from annihilating everything we've fought for. We don't have a second chance. We either succeed or we die trying. But I know we can do this. I trust every one of you. Let's bring this fight to them." The crew cheered, their spirits lifted by Kara's words. There was no doubt in their minds they were ready. They had to be. As the operation began, Kara felt a sense of unity among the crew. They moved as one, each person knowing their role, each person performing their tasks with precision and determination. The Zorath's defenses were formidable, but the Nova horizon was small, agile, and quick. They navigated through the heavily guarded space, avoiding detection as they made their way to the heart of the Zorath stronghold. But things didn't go as planned. They encountered unexpected resistance, Zorath ships that had been hidden in the shadows, waiting for them. The crew fought back, but the battle was fierce. Kara's heart pounded in her chest as she issued orders, directing the crew with steady precision, but the situation was quickly becoming critical. The Nova horizon was damaged, and the Zorath forces were closing in. In the midst of the chaos, Kara found herself at the heart of the battle, face to face with the leader of the Zorath. The confrontation was inevitable, and Kara knew this was the moment that would decide everything. She had no idea if they would win, but she knew one thing. They had come this far and they weren't going to give up now. Lyra appeared beside her, her eyes fierce and determined. Without a word, the two of them attacked, working together as if they had always been a team. There was no fear, no hesitation. Just the bond between them, the unspoken trust that had grown over the months they had spent fighting side by side. In the end, it was that bond, along with the strength of the entire crew, that led them to victory. They disabled the Zarath weapon, destroying their forces and ensuring that the war would finally come to an end. As the Nova Horizon sailed away from the wreckage of the Zarath stronghold, Kara stood on the bridge, looking out into the vastness of space. The battle was over. The war was over, but there was still so much left to rebuild, still so much left to fight for, and for the first time in a long time Kara felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone anymore. They had made it through, together.